career development. Before we start, I would like to share with you some technical information. In order to ensure that the webinar runs smoothly, please remain muted throughout the whole meeting. If you would like to raise a question or share your view, please raise your hand or wait until you are asked. Alternatively, you can type your questions in the chat box. Please note that the webinar is recorded. Let's check the agenda. Today, of course, the welcome address, this is the part I'm doing right now. The first presentation, Leading Diversity and Inclusion, by Dr. Maria Angelica Perez, Global Head of Diversity and Inclusion and Standard Charter. The second presentation, Equal Working Opportunities and Leveling Up Diversity and Inclusion Considerations, Katie Tant, Global Diversity and Inclusion Manager, Linkletters. The third one, Why Becoming an Ally is Key to Diversity and Inclusion Strategies, Laura Nicoletta Marinescu, Director, Industrial Engineering Scheffler Group in Romania. And the last one, Ela Bonda, Diversity and Inclusion Lead, Head and Property and Workplace, NatWest Poland, Crown Jewels, Employee-Led Networks. Then we will have a Q&A session, and I strongly encourage you to switch your camera off and to be active, because we are meeting today to share experience, to get insights and inspire each other. And to do that, we have to be active. So please raise your hand, ask your questions, send your comments during the Q&A session in the chat. So Working Together program, this is the first year we have a year-round program. We already delivered 2 topics, managing culture diversity in the workplace, inclusive recruitment. In a few days, we will have a great pleasure to share inclusive recruitment guideline. Please follow our social media to find our newest publication. Upcoming topics, September, October, language ethics, and the last one, inclusive employer branding. So once again, follow us to find more details about upcoming topics. And now it's time to give a lead and give a stream to our keynote speaker, Dr. Maria Angelica Perez from Standard & Charter, our Platinum partner. Maria, the stream is yours.
Thank you, and thank you so much for having me, and welcome everyone. Today I'm going to be sharing with you the Standard Charter journey towards leading diversity and inclusion. If we can please have the first slide, please. Next slide. Just as an introduction for those of you who are not aware of our bank, our footprint across the world is very unique. We employ more than 85,000 people who come from 125 different countries, and they speak 176 different languages. 45% of our employees are female, and we operate across 59 different markets throughout Africa, Asia, and the Middle East, and we have been around for over 160 years. Please, can we go to the next slide? Please, can we go to the next slide?
It is changed. Diversity and inclusion, yes.
I'm sorry, I'm not, and now I can see it perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
So this is really a slide that covers our diversity and inclusion strategy, and it's all centered around our purpose. And our purpose is to drive commerce and prosperity through our unique diversity. And we're really looking to build a culture of inclusion that is a critical lever to our business success, and is going to enable us as an organization to be the best place to work, the best place to bank, and to contribute to creating prosperous communities. In order to enable this, we have three key objectives of our diversity and inclusion strategy. The first one is all around people. So we want to attract, engage, develop, and retain diverse talent to maximize performance. The second one is all about the client and the customer. Here, we're looking to deliver banking products and services that meet the needs of our diverse client base. And the last one is all about our communities. And here we look at two different things. The first part is really to support a diverse and responsible supply chain. And the second piece is all around the investment in the communities that we work in. Our diversity and inclusion is going to enable our teams to really unlock innovation across our organization, to make better decisions, and to deliver our business strategy, but also to live our value behaviors and embody being here for good as an organization. Our global focus areas are supported by building a culture of inclusion, but also building a culture of well-being. And under well-being, we look at 4 areas, which is mental well-being, physical well-being, financial well-being, and social well-being. If we can move to the next slide, please. As you can see from the slide before, our strategy does not mention any diversity demographic, and that's because we look at demographics as strategic focus areas. We currently have identified these common areas for focus. So the first one that we look at is gender, and here we want to engage all genders in a continuous support and progress towards gender equality. We also focus on nationality and ethnicity, and we want to have a workforce that's representative of our client base and footprint. We look at generations, and here it's really to leverage generational experience to increase innovation and really to deliver those products and services, both for employees, but also for clients at various life stages. We look at disability, and here we want to become a disability confident organization with a focus on removing barriers and increasing accessibility. And lastly, we look at sexual orientation. And here we're looking to provide support, enable individuals to bring their whole selves to work and be appreciated for who they are and what they bring to the organization. If we can move to the next slide, please. As part of our strategy, we also have an approach to diversity and inclusion. And that approach consists of several elements. This is what we believe makes our strategy successful. The first one is the tone from the top. So here we have a sponsorship from the board, from the CEO, from the management team. Just as an example, I'm presenting to the board tomorrow. We present 2 times a year to the board the progress that is being made on diversity and inclusion. But also the sponsorship from the top means accountability. So here, specifically, our CEOs and country management teams are responsible for establishing, operationalizing, reviewing, and monitoring D&I plans, the progress and the metrics. We have developed global dashboards that help senior leaders make data-driven decisions, and where possible, key targets are embedded into the scorecards. The second element here is alignment to client needs and services. So we're looking beyond the workplace to really think through clients and think through what is it that we're going to develop and do to support our clients. An example of this is that we launched our impact philosophy, and this was an impact investment offering to clients, which facilitates contributions to the sustainable development goals, including gender equality and reduce inequalities. We've also partnered with Impact Investment Exchange to issue Asia Pacific's first multi-country listed gender bond, which is creating sustainable livelihoods for 180,000 underserved women across Asia. We focus on inclusive leadership, and as part of this, we've launched an inclusive leadership program to support 16,000 people leaders across our organization. And this was important because we want to develop an inclusive work environment and equip people leaders with the skills and capability to drive change and mitigate bias. Strategic alignment and integration with people and business processes is really important, because this is really how you change your culture. This is about the things that you do around the organizations, or the way people point to, this is how you do things around here. To do this, we brought together key centers of excellence from across the organization, such as performance, reward, benefits, sustainability, property, brand and marketing, the supply chain management, etc. And collectively, these teams are responsible for reviewing their own processes within each of their areas and identifying opportunities for improvement. This group has delivered on over 100 D&I actions and objectives over the last 2 years. Just to give you an example of some of the things that they have done as part of our recruitment system, they've been able to change that working both with our legal team and our recruitment teams. And they've been able to change the recruitment system so that we're able to collect diversity demographical data from people externally who are applying into our organization. So we're able to track gender, ethnicity. This allows us now to understand if a woman is applying to role and they're not being successful, what is happening in the recruitment cycle? Where are they falling out of the process? Similar for ethnic minorities and so on. Another example is the development of a disability confidence assessment to help countries develop a consistent understanding and align to our global approach to disability. And this includes both mental health and well-being. So that was another project that was driven also by these integration partners. We also have targeted action. And these targeted actions include examples of things like returner programs, which are run in several markets like Hong Kong and Malaysia and India. And they really provide development and job opportunities to encourage women to re-enter the workforce following a career break. We also have developed content for SMEs by leveraging partnership with the Group Business Banking Alliance and to help create learning platform for women entrepreneurs. So that's just another example of a targeted specific action that's more targeted at the community and at women entrepreneurs. We also have a local focus to address country level needs. So we have over 16 ERGs across the organization that help support D&I plans. And then lastly, we really look at transparency, and we've developed an approach to measure more than just traditional D&I metrics, so not just the percentage of women in senior roles, but also looking at culture and inclusion more broadly. And we have an inclusion index that looks at things to access to tools to do the work, to feeling safe to express views, to feeling able to grow yourself, and having harmony in work life. And so that's just a couple of examples. If we move to the next slide, please. So I'm just going to share now some of our inclusive practices that we've have across the organization. We've have a diversity and inclusion standard that sets out the intent of the group to ensure a respectful workplace with fair and equable treatment and provision of opportunities for staff to fully participate and reach their full potential and to have an appropriate working environment. This standard is for all employees, our contractors, and suppliers of the group. So it covers everyone needs to adhere to our standard. We've also launched a fair pay charter, which sets out the principles which guide all of our reward and performance decision making. One of the principles is our ongoing commitment to rewarding colleagues in a way that is free from discrimination on the basis of diversity. And this includes gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and so on. Equal pay analysis by gender is part of our annual year-end pay review process, and outcomes are reviewed by the HR function, the management team, the board, and the remuneration committee. And we also have prepared fair pay report, which you can also find online on our .com pages. We have been focusing on the future of work, which we call the future of work now, over the past year. And to do this, we've taken colleagues' insights to redesign how work can be done in the future and the associated impact on our workplace, where we've agreed some core principles, where role can be done flexibly, balancing both the needs of the business and personal needs. And then finally, a sustainable approach that is fit for the future, focus on motivating and retaining diverse talent, but also building resilience and supporting well-being and productivity. We have launched this across 9 markets, including in Poland. And employees in these locations have the options to select time both in the number of hours or days and the location flexibility. and where they want to work. So this could be working on our premises or working from home. And additionally, we've been partnering with a third-party vendor to provide additional near-home workspaces for those individuals who may not necessarily want to go into the office, or may not. It may not be the best for them to come into the office. Maybe it's not the best for them to work from home. They have this third space where they can use. I'll focus on supplier diversity because I think this is an area where there's a lot of supplier diversity programs and organizations, but they tend to be more US focused. Sometimes we see them more in the UK, but less so globally. We've launched a global diversity supplier program as part of our diversity strategy. And as part of that, we've also created a global standard for suppliers, which is really, really important because it's going to help us connect with the suppliers, ensure that they're also working on diversity and inclusion for their organizations. But it also means that we're mentoring and upskilling and educating suppliers that are either women-owned or ethnic minority-owned and so on, to really understand how they can potentially become suppliers for us as a bank. And we find this to be quite important. And we hope that more companies think about the supply chain and the impact that their organizations can also have on the supply chain, to help those organizations also start their diversity and inclusion journey. We provide many other programs like our Future Makers program, which is to promote women entrepreneurs, and it has reached over 2,000 girls and young women through our community. And our program is really focused on education, employability, and entrepreneurship. This has included women in tech incubators, working to support Black men who may be disproportionately struggling around unemployment and underemployment. We've also done mentoring programs in the community, and this all falls under a kind of our Future Maker programs. In addition to that, we have career development, mentoring, sponsorship. We have a global parental leave policy. This just gives you a good range of some of the things that we're working on in our organization. Please, can we go to the next slide? We recognize that this is a continuing process, and we continue, and we need to continue to improve. But this just gives you an idea. Our strategy is three years old, and we have already been recognized externally through different benchmarks and awards. For the work that our organization has been doing, which is great to see, because this just shows that our approach is working, but it also means our organization across our footprint is really engaged in driving this diversity and an inclusive working environment. If we go to the next slide. I'm sharing this slide because as part of our strategy, I mentioned that we really want to also support our communities, but also our customers. And one of the things that we've decided to do was really to create tools that will help other companies think about diversity and inclusion, but also support them in their journey. We have launched several toolkits, which can be accessed on our .com pages if you go under diversity and inclusion. We're also looking at things that companies may not necessarily see as a diversity and inclusion issue. So we've recently did something around domestic violence and abuse. We've launched an inclusive language toolkit. We have a toolkit on disability, on sexual orientation, on race, and most recently we're going to be conducting research around menopause, and that research will be out later in the fall. But again, that will create something that we can then share with the industry in regards to how companies can support women during menopause. So again, this is just part of our strategy. We don't see this as it's just about our organization, but we want to support others in this journey as well. So I'll leave it there, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. We decided to have a Q&A session at the end, but maybe to warm up a little bit audience, we will take the first question from the chat, okay? So the question from Agnieszka Adamska. Are you supporting neurodiversity, different development patterns, especially in women, like autism, ADHD, and others?
Absolutely. So if you remember our strategy, there's three pillars: the employee, the client, and the community. And then we have the 5 focus areas. So you mentioned gender and disability. So the way we think about objectives around that, and we also look at these as intersectionality. So we could look at the employee from a gender and disability perspective, and maybe an ethnicity perspective, or we may look at a client from the same thing, from a disability perspective, from a gender perspective, or we may be supporting something in the community covering the 2 angles. So absolutely. Oh, I can't hear you. I think you're on mute.
Sorry, Maria. It happens sometimes that you forget to unmute yourself. Sorry. So once again, thank you. I strongly encourage for further questions during the Q&A session. And now, if I may ask Joanna to change the slide. Thank you. Equal working opportunities and leveling up, diversity and inclusions considerations. Katie Tant. Katie, the stream is yours.
Thank you very much, and hopefully you can all hear me clearly, but please do let me know if not. My name is Katie Tant. I'm a manager in the diversity and inclusion team at Linklaters. We are a global law firm. We have over 5,000 employees that are based in 21 different countries. And as you can imagine, in that context, we deal with D&I in a global way, very similar to the approach that you just heard from Maria in relation to Standard Chartered. What we do is try and help our colleagues across our network to implement our kind of global principles in a local way. And what I'm going to do for the next 10 to 15 minutes is talk to you about how do the equity, diversity and inclusion issues that you just had a great introduction to from Maria play into this equal opportunities and levelling up issue. On the next slide, you will see what I'm going to cover. Firstly, I'm going to discuss the what and the why. So what is the issue? Why is it important to level up? Then I'll go into some thoughts about what businesses and leaders can do and should be thinking about in relation to this issue. And then finally, I'll leave you with 3 top tips to consider when you're thinking about working opportunities and levelling up. So on the next slide, please, what you can see is a visual representation of how I like to see the workplace. It is, for me, a big game of Tetris. We are all different shapes, sizes, we all come from somewhere different. And the trick is really to get us all to fit together, to work together and find a way for us all to feel that we belong. And the point from an equity, diversity and inclusion point of view is that we know that those from underrepresented backgrounds in any given workplace will experience companies differently. And they might find it more difficult to get access to the same work opportunities in a way that those from the majority group will not. And then this has a knock-on impact on retention and progression of those from minority groups. And speaking for me in the legal field in the UK, this tends to be women, those from minority ethnic backgrounds, and those who might be LGBT+. And what we see is that the representation of those groups at leadership levels in particular is very, very small. And why is this really? One reason for this is that unconscious biases can come into play in the ways that we interact with people that we work with. On this slide, you can see some of those unconscious biases laid out. I'm not going to talk you through all of them, but in particular, what I would like to bring your attention to is the performance bias and the attribution bias. And if you think about how those might play out in things like performance reviews, feedback from peers or from seniors, appraisal ratings, opportunity to access to that high quality demanding work, secondment opportunities, all these things that we know help to retain and progress people through to senior levels. If people aren't being assessed fairly because of these biases, then that does cause an issue with the work they're given access to and their ability to progress up through the organisation. And the point for me is that then that field that people are playing on is not level, because people from a minority group are fighting against these biases and most likely an uninclusive culture. And so they are not playing on that same field. So why is it important to level up? On the next slide, you can see again my visual representation of leveling up. How do we make sure that everybody is playing on that same playing field? I'm going to discuss some interventions and some things that you might want to consider later on. But firstly, I want to think about why it is important to level up. Firstly, there is that moral argument. It is the right thing to do to make sure that everybody in our businesses has the same opportunity to get access to good quality work and to progress. There's also the business case that Maria touched on as well. We know that businesses that are more diverse are more profitable. And the business case for diversity and inclusion has been proven time and time again, so I'm not going to rehearse it again here, but it is important on this front, from a business point of view, to make sure that businesses are doing everything they can to attract, retain, and develop their talent, including their diverse talent. The important thing is that when different businesses look at what levelling up means to them, it will depend very much on the specifics of their situation. The country they operate in, the sector they operate in, both of these things are going to inform what the majority and minority groups might look like in their situation, as well as the specific culture of their business. And it may well be that the majority of the work that is done will, in different ways, go to dealing with the impacts of the biases that I just spoke about can have in terms of development and work opportunities and promotion for those from underrepresented groups. But what is really crucial for me is for businesses to think about their own specific situation and put in place very targeted interventions to help ensure that those from underrepresented groups do get access to that good quality work, to fair and kind of good quality feedback, and also that they are playing on that same level playing field. That will help make businesses as a whole, leadership teams and decision-making bodies more diverse and inclusive and therefore more profitable. Before we move on to consider some of the specific interventions you could consider, one thing that I would like to flag is on the next slide, when we're talking about equity here, we're making sure that everybody has the same experience and opportunity. It's not just giving everybody the same thing. As you can see from the picture on the left-hand side of this slide, even if you give everybody the same thing, the outcome could still be very unequal. And it is really important, I think, to think about the outcomes when you're thinking about the interventions that you might use to level up that playing field. So how would I suggest that you think about these issues? On the next slide, you can see that there are 4 main areas that businesses could be looking at to help ensure they're levelling up the playing field and giving those equal opportunities to all. You heard, I will say, some fantastic examples from Maria of programs and actions that businesses can take. So I would ask you to hold those in your mind as you think about what I'm going to be speaking about over the next few moments, because they were all fantastic examples. Firstly, I would say know your data. Data, data, data. Data is king. To the extent that you can, know how many people from underrepresented groups you have and where they are in your organization. Obviously, we know that data collection and use of that data can be tricky with GDPR regulations and things like that. But as much as you can, know who your people are, where they sit in your business, and what their journey and experience looks like. And tied with that, I would say to use that data to look at the entire employee life cycle through a diversity and inclusion lens. Look at recruitment, look at retention, look at progression, look at how you analyze your top talent, and use that data and with the employee life cycle to look for where particular groups might be underrepresented and why they might be underrepresented as you go through certain levels. And that can help you to put in place those specific interventions to help increase representation at certain levels. So for us at Linklaters, for example, in the UK, we noticed that in the gender space, for example, we were recruiting at about 50-50 men and women. But then as you go up the leadership curve, the number of women becomes less and less and less. So we carried out some analysis as to why that might be, looking at the reasons why people had left and what we could have done to help them stay. And what the data told us was that the way that men were expressing their career aspirations was more in line with what the typically male leaders they were talking to were expecting to hear. What that led to was men progressing faster, women feeling demoralized and then leaving. So what we did was roll out unconscious bias training and inclusive leadership training to those leaders to help them understand the different ways that women might express themselves and the impact that that could have on career progression. Tied to that, we put in place a leadership program for women for our more senior associates. The data analysis we'd done had told us that men were getting more sponsorship from seniors that came more naturally. So we forced that issue for the women, and we gave our top talent sponsors from within the leadership team. And we now have a situation where 38% of our female partners have been through our leadership program. We also put in place a coaching program for more junior associates and sponsorship programs to help retain talent. Because of our data analysis, we knew we didn't need to focus too much on recruitment because we were already at 50-50 there. So these new interventions were at a different point of that employee life cycle, and it was the data that helped us to make that decision. The point with these interventions, as I mentioned earlier, was not to give the women a leg up. It was to give them something that the men were already getting. Unconscious biases had meant that our male leaders were unconsciously favouring male associates by giving them sponsorship, networking opportunities, and access to good work. They didn't know they were doing this, but this was just the result of the relationships they had. And we used that data and the employee life cycle to know that that's where we needed to concentrate, to give those women the opportunities that were not happening for them naturally. So use your data, look at the employee life cycle, look at work allocation, do analysis around who's being given what opportunities, and identify trends. And then SMART interventions. I'm sure you've all seen this acronym before. Make sure that actions are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. What we have found works very well is to give specific people the role of taking forward specific actions, give them deadlines, hold them accountable. For example, in the gender space, again, we've asked each practice group in the firm to put in place an action plan to achieve 50-50 representation of men and women across all of our population levels. And we've asked them to kind of name partners who will be taking actions in relation to specific women. So the interventions that might be put in place for those women will be different, but we are expecting specific individuals to report back on how that's going and help retain women through to senior positions. The final things I would say on this slide is that tone from the top is incredibly important, and this is where inclusion comes in. As Maria mentioned, this is the culture of your business. And for me, this means not only senior leadership, but also line managers who need to engage, understand, and take action. This might require some training around things like unconscious bias, and also looking out for equality in the feedback, promotion, and salary conversations that people have. And what this can do is help managers to understand how different people experience a workplace. Also covers things like setting the right tone and creating an inclusive culture. Because we all know that diversity is one thing, but if people don't feel that they can bring themselves to work, that they can be themselves and are valued for the difference that they bring to a company, then this is not going to be terribly successful. And this primarily comes through line managers. It's people's day-to-day experiences. So tone from the top, as in senior leadership, is very important, but also people's day-to-day experiences are crucial as well. And this is where allyship, which I think Laura is going to talk about later, is also absolutely crucial. So you will hear more on that later this morning. So my final kind of thoughts on the slide, on my final slide, my 3 top tips, if you like. What I would say is do definitely see this as an ongoing conversation. It does require ongoing effort. It is about policies and process, but also about practice. Leaders and managers need to follow those policies and processes, but also live by values so that people's experiences are good in reality. How can you instill that in your leaders and empower them to take this forward? The second thing I would say is know your data. Understand where people are not represented in your companies, where there are fewer women, where there are fewer minority ethnic colleagues, and seek to understand why and be specific about the interventions that you put in place. Finally, aligned to this, please don't discount inclusion. You can bring in people from different backgrounds, but if they don't feel welcome, as I said, they're not going to stay. This is where your leadership and management and culture is key. And if you can focus on these things, then I think you will find that you level out that playing field. You will find that a full range of people are being given the same opportunities, access to work and progression, and that hopefully, therefore, you will have a more diverse and inclusive workforce across all levels of your business. So I will leave that with you for now, but I'm happy to answer any questions either now or later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's save the questions for the Q&A session, and let's move smoothly to the other presentation. Why becoming an ally is a key to D&I strategies. Laura, I hand over to you.
Yes, thank you. So, hello everybody. I'm genuinely glad to be here today. And that I have the opportunity to present both content on D&I, diversity and inclusion, and personal experiences to you as an audience. I am confident I will manage to give you some food for thought, both for the executive and also the other HR professionals that are attending today's webinar with ABSL. Let me first just briefly introduce myself so that you can relate to my perspective on the topics of D&I. As I am not an expert on the matter, I am actually one of the statistics, so to say. I'm 39, holding during my professional years several expert and leadership positions. I am right now with Scheffler in Romania for 14 years. Scheffler is an automotive and industrial top supplier, and I'm holding the role of industrial engineering director for a large size bearing plant in Romania, as I said. The campus here employs 5,000 headcounts and is mainly a supplier for wind power, wind energy components, the business for which I'm also acting. Before jumping into the actual insights of my presentation, let us all begin with a riddle. It is based on a movie from Mindspace Agency. I actually got it from a very good friend of mine, and I dare you all to participate to it and try to crack it also as I did. It goes like this. A father is about to bring his son to a job interview, applying for a position at a large company in the city. Just as they arrive at the company's parking lot, the son's phone rings. He looks at his father, who says, "Go ahead, answer it." The caller is the trading company's CEO, who says, "Good luck, son, you've got this." The son ends the call and once again looks at his father, who is still next to him in their car. How is this possible? I took a few minutes back then going through my head for various solutions to this riddle. As I'm sure you also did. There are more possibilities of solving this, but in this particular situation, the CEO was the mother. Let me tell you, I fell for it too. Not one of all my solutions was that the CEO is a woman. I felt bad afterwards. So why I want to lead with this story is because the first step of change is admitting that even with the best intentions and life experiences, we are still prone to having unconscious biases. I learned my lesson back then, and I took up on myself to not to fall short to the pitfalls of stereotypes. And this is my first personal and most important D&I message. So going further into the presentation, to the next slide. Let me start with funny now, but not so funny story back then. I was for many years the only woman in a picture at the end of a conference, or the only female voice in workshops, otherwise maybe packed with testosterone. The only manager in an industrial business without having engineering formal education. Being the only, you are like under a spotlight, or at least you feel like this. I'm also part of the statistics that say that microaggressions at work can happen and are real. So going back to the story, during a meeting in which our local team was reviewed by the regional management, I presented also the operational performance indicators of my area. I was appointed in that position since 1 or 2 months. At the end of my presentation, I was asked a question by a manager outside of my team. He wanted to know if I had any kids. My answer was no, I didn't. The conclusion that he drew afterwards was a blunt form of discrimination, as I could identify afterwards. He said, Mrs. Marinescu, that means if you don't have kids, you have plenty of time to learn about the technology topic. That was not my strong point back then. I'm laughing now. And I'm proud to have been able to gracefully react to his conclusion. I will leave you all with this small homework. Just think about what would you do in that situation. So it is not by chance that onlys are 1.5 times more likely to consider leaving their jobs when performance is shadowed just because they're part of a minority. I myself didn't let that singular situation define my career or stop being my authentic self. It doesn't have to be a gender-biased behavior that causes disruption in trusting yourself. The biases can be undercover in many forms. Of course, the obvious LGBTQ+, the youngest in the room maybe, the one that is a Switzerland football fan and not France. I think you got my point. Also, think about it. When you conjure up the image of a powerful CEO in mind, who do you see? If you're like most people, you probably see a middle-aged white guy. When you think of a successful lawyer, who do you see? And when you think of a dangerous criminal, who comes to mind? So the story that I shared with you before, I think it's not only mine, as I'm sure that my manager back then, who was the greatest mentor that I had, was also, as a male, visibly affected by that situation. He was shocked that in today's mature business society, where diversity is a true capital that you can leverage on, there are still, let's call them rotten apples, who try to bully their way through. Good, so let's step up further in the presentation into some specific strategies then that can back up the struggle for reaching an inclusive environment. Showing inclusivity is a powerful act both for women and male leaders. And for being able to manage that, we all first need to acknowledge and overcome our biases. So how can you avoid these biases and make lasting change that will make your workforce feel more engaged and more productive? Education, communication, attention. That can be a recipe that you can handle yourself as a leader. Self-education can be done in different ways, for sure, one of which can be also feedback. You are getting real gold information directly from the employees, which are part of minority groups, and understanding their perspectives on things can sharpen your actual situational awareness. The second one, communication, or also known as ask about experience. I actually tried that last week during my holiday in Greece. where I spent it with 5 of my very best friends. One of them is also like a brother to me. I know him for 15 years, and he's a successful gay engineering manager. I realized I never asked him that what is his personal experience at the workplace, with that being part of the LGBTQ plus community, or let's say more important, what is his individual expectation from the work environment and the colleagues. He replied, nothing that anyone else needs to grow and show their potential, and that is respect. I think we had a nice talk. So the third one, attention. Have you ever worked for a workplace that made you feel invisible, or a place where you had to hide certain aspects of your personality just to fit in? Maybe you don't like to smoke, or you are a valued part, or let's say you are part of the sports community, but you back then felt that you had to pretend to enjoy these things in order to be a team player for the others. So no one wants to feel like they don't belong, which is why inclusivity is so important, especially in the workplace. People do their best really only when they feel that they are a true part of the organization, that they can bring value add, and when they are truly noticed. So when they feel like they belong, for sure, they really are happier and more engaged. So let's draw the conclusion on the next slide, please. When you were at school, I'm sure that people back then also segregate themselves at lunchtime, maybe girls with girls, boys separately, the geek kids all sit in different areas. Sadly, that sort of behavior is still common also among adults. So if you are a manager, the last thing you want to see is a sharply divided workforce. There are plenty of good reasons to desire a very diverse workforce made up of happy workers who feel that their uniqueness is truly appreciated. After all, happy workers are the productive workers. So your job as a manager should be that of the inclusifier. This is based on a Stephanie Johnson book. You should grow into a leader who celebrates diverse perspectives and makes sure everyone feels a sense of belonging. So diversity is the mix, and inclusion is making the mix work. Coming up to the last slide, how does a company like Scheffler put that into practice? So D&I is a powerful enabler of business performance, of that I'm sure. Companies whose leaders welcome diverse talents and include multiple perspectives are likely to emerge from any challenges stronger. In short, D&I, diversity and inclusion, wins now more than ever in this business environment. So that is why Scheffler set up with more than 600 leaders trainings, aka discussions, to raise awareness about the different perspectives of minority groups. We can also align to the tone from the top that Katie was talking before. And for sure, another successful initiative that is going on right now in Scheffler is building up the Global D&I Council. I was also grateful to meet 2 of its members, and I'm sure that you can accelerate as a company, as learned from one of them, this change by releasing policies. And I strongly think that this is one of the first steps every organization should do. As per our D&I statement of purpose that you see on the slide right now, at Scheffler, we have an unwavering commitment to building an environment where we respect one another, embrace diversity, and foster an inclusive culture. In striving for equity and belonging as an integral part of our organization, our goal is to ensure that everyone is valued and empowered to share their experiences and ideas. Our differences inspire creativity and drive innovation. Through unique perspectives, together we can advance how the world moves. So also, we at Scheffler are not viewing D&I as a luxury we cannot afford during these challenging business models nowadays. We believe that companies who do that risk to damage their license to operate in the long term and could lose out on very real opportunities to innovate their business canvas and also strengthen for sure their business goals. So we invest in collaboration on these topics, and one of the programs that is running successfully is the Women Mentoring at Scheffler, where both women mentees and male and female mentors drive the change, and I can tell you from personal experience, they are also having fun. So closing for today, I personally find that the dynamics around inclusion are a critical differentiator for companies, no matter in which business they are acting, be it services or manufacturing. I have to underline that an emphasis on representation is not enough. Employees need to feel and perceive equality and fairness, true fairness of opportunity in their workplace. And this is the reason for which we have to put some real work into becoming better allies for them. I'm also eager to answer also your question in our Q&A session at the end of our webinar. Thank you.
Laura, thank you for sharing your experience. Perfect timing. And dear participants, prepare your questions because now we will have the last presentation and then Q&A session. Crown Jewels, employee-led networks, and Ella Bonda. Ella, the stream is yours.
Thank you, Ivana. And yeah, it was great to hear all the examples before me from other companies. And while the focus was very much on the strategic element and the policies and procedures, which are the key for diversity and inclusion element in a company, today I would like to give you the example of the bottom-up initiatives that we run successfully in NatWest. But first, let me tell you a little bit about NatWest. Then I will guide you through the sense of the employee-led networks. And at the end, I will give you a couple of examples what our networks in Poland are doing. So my name is Ella Bonda. I'm Diversity and Inclusion Lead at NatWest Poland. NatWest Group is a large financial institution hiring dozens of thousands of employees and serving mainly customers in UK. Locally, we are about 1,500 people on board. We are very energetic, experienced, and with strong expertise. Future ready as everyone now, and with proactive risk culture, so there are no surprises. Social makeup, I think it's an interesting fact for today's meeting. 90% of our colleagues is holding a master degree or higher. Men-women ratio remains half and half, with 49 women in managerial positions. 60% of our colleagues is living with a special condition, and they recognize themselves as having a disability from both mental or physical side. 10% of us identifies themselves as a non-Polish origin, so this is our multicultural crowd. And around 6% of us identify themselves as belonging to LGBT+ community. So this is the local makeup. We champion potential of our colleagues, customers, and communities. This is no different to my dear previous speakers. We support growth of our people, providing them with the learning, flexible working options, which are very important, especially right now, and a variety of development opportunities. Being part of employee-led networks is indeed a development opportunity and is being perceived as such. We truly believe everybody should be able to bring themselves as a whole to work. We invest in our community and engaging in various corporate social responsibility initiatives. So in Poland, you may wonder why I'm saying that I'm diversity and inclusion lead, but also I'm property and workplace head for Poland. So the second is my main role. I'm being diversity and inclusion lead as addition to my main role. I don't have a contract saying that I'm a diversity and inclusion lead. And our diversity and inclusion agenda is largely driven via employee-led networks. So the bottom-up groups that we are forming at NatWest. There are networks that are linked one-to-one with the global groups, which I will be talking in a second about. But also there are employee-led networks that were born out locally in Poland. The networks, they are always made up from volunteer employees who play a key role in delivering, raising awareness and influencing our bank-wide inclusion strategy. The networks, they also provide an avenue for focused personal development, as well as numerous networking opportunities for the members. Employee-led networks are play key role in supporting NatWest in achieving their purpose. And also networks and the members, they help us understand our colleagues and customers better. And we work together to meet both colleagues, communities, and customers' needs. Very briefly, and I'm happy to share the details with anyone who would like to understand more later on, either in this stream or I'm happy to be contacted later, because the question I'm getting very often, how employee-led networks are operating. So first of all, majority of them, they operate on a global basis, but as I said, there are some that are born locally in Poland or in other countries, depending on the specific needs. But they are basically open to all employees at the bank. We collaborate with other groups across the organization to deliver inclusive outcomes as well. And what's the most important is to ensure that all employee-led networks activity is fully inclusive for the members. In terms of role responsibilities, we help to shape those for employee-led networks. There is kind of set of employee-led networks volunteer performance goals, but main of these goals is to be a role model and to be recognized as an advocate for respective agenda of diversity and inclusion, and also to positively challenge the business and colleagues to support the agenda. Also, some of the employees-led networks will have committee structure, so they have divided roles and responsibilities amongst them to work more efficiently. Also, we ask them to publish a clearly defined operating model which outlines the terms of office for any committee role members. So it might seem that we request them to do a lot before they actually engage with communities and colleagues, but this is very much about the development of the individuals who want to be engaged in the networks as well. So they shape their business acumen through being involved in diversity and inclusion sphere. Each of the network will have a sponsor. It will be a senior person, either from the board, either from the management, and the sponsor supports employee-led network in their doing, in their initiatives. They will also work with the influencers on the outside of the company, but very often many employee-led networks committee members themselves will be considered as influencers. From the budget and funding section, it's always important to talk the money as well. on an annual basis, diversity and inclusion team, the global one, through the normal budgeting planning process, will put a pot of funding to be made available to the employer networks to support delivery of the actions. Employer networks members will seek the feedback as well, and we will provide them with the feedback as they request, and also we will provide them feedback proactively. And we will also very closely look at the action, especially the sponsor will do that, and we will recognize collective and individual activities as well. Employee-led networks will also work very widely with third parties, especially with the NGOs and charities. This to support our communities. They will also work with the influencers or specialist companies in their area of interest. They will also use our formal and informal communication channels, both internal and external ones. These days, especially our social media will be open for them to communicate what they achieve or what they plan to achieve, or if there is anything they need to get help. So in terms of the employee-led networks present in Poland, we have 9 of them. I will briefly talk through all of this about the goal and what they do or done recently, or what they are planning to do. I think this is also a food for thought for anyone who would like to engage their employees in similar activities. So Women Network Poland, this is our gender network. Their vision is to make NatWest a place where everyone, whatever their gender, can achieve their potential. They have 3 main streams. One is advocate, another one cultivate and transform. Lastly, they delivered Women in Tech Days. They also delivered, actually last week, Why Tech Needs to Be Inclusive, a panel with Aleksandra Przeganiska, who's a renowned AI expert. They are just kicking off a gender development, the gender network development program. And what's important to mention, it's not open only for the ladies. It's open inclusively for all the genders to kind of apply and be there. Also, we've been awarded with Fair to Women title for our special activities related to STEM inclusion. And this is very much related to what our Women Network is doing. Next network is Enable Network Poland, and their goal is to make NatWest Group the employer of choice by enabling and nurturing an accessible, inclusive, and supportive culture within the bank. They promote awareness of disability, and they celebrate the diversity it brings. In terms of the examples, what they've done recently, there we had an awareness session on neurodiversity. I've heard this already as something very interesting for our audience. We've been working with an NGO called Otwarte Drzwi on their goals and support the community. We are recording mental health podcasts with Gender Network, so we collaborate across the networks as well. On the practical element, Enable Network Poland developed a workstation assessment for our colleagues, especially these days is very important while we are working away from the office, and we need to understand what is needed to be safe at home. Next one is Multicultural Network. They want to raise awareness of cultural diversity. They also want to provide support to international colleagues, especially if they join Poland and they are first time in Poland, so they can be easily settling in our country. Also, they are looking at supporting community to become more inclusive. Recent panel, which was called Kocham Cię Polsko, I Love You Poland, where we had our multicultural colleagues saying how they've been settling for that matter in Poland, and what is good and not so good in Poland, and how can we help them. These days also the network is collecting and sharing details about various religious events worldwide. So also this richness is very important for them, and they want to show off how we differ and how can we learn from each other. They are planning to have a webinar presentation about the country they come from and the culture and custom. And on the outside, they cooperate with an NGO supporting refugees. Families and carers, they are all about people who have a family and they have kids, or they are carers, so they care about dependent adult family members, and they want to support all of these kind of needs that communities or colleagues might have. On the external side, they are cooperating very much with Big Brothers and Big Sisters NGO and helping them. Their last achievement was the implementation of the in vitro subsidy by NatWest to our employees. So this is a really great achievement of the network. And right now they are promoting safer internet sessions to our younger generations, but also to seniors. The next one is Rainbow Network. Obviously, we are here to support any LGBT issues our colleagues or communities might have. It's very important here in Poland, as we know that the law is not very much friendly to this community, and we are really working to tackle that. The network supported the Hobbit campaign that happened this year. They also made a number of donations by collecting money from both company and our colleagues. We've donated over 100 of various equipment to LGBT NGOs. We are preparing also very much to LGBT Plus Diamonds Awards that will happen in fall this year. And for that, we had a session through Facebook with Sylwia Hutnik, Przemek Staroń, and other LGBT activists to support understanding of the agenda. Sustainable Future Network is all about climate. It's very much ESG orientated. We want to be climate positive by 2025 as the company for our own operations. The network is promoting very much a healthy lifestyle that supports climate. Right now, they are promoting geeky carbon footprint application that helps you understand how your life impacts the climate. From the practical point of view, we've been working with the network to support, to kind of build a pipeline of eco ideas to be implemented in our new office makeup. We've had sessions on water ecosystems, bee sessions, and also we created with the network a carbon footprint calculator that we can use to calculate how much we are producing of the carbon working from home. And on the outside, we've been cleaning Vistula rivers with Jawisła Foundation. Financial education is all about increasing employees' financial literacy, and also supporting communities in gaining financial sustainability. There is a whole avenue of development from the financial angle, what we can learn from each other as employees, but also we are educating younger and older generations. And from the outside, the network is cooperating with an NGO called Fundacja Daj Herbatę on activating homeless people on the work market. Golden Fish, it's a very nice name for our network that supports charities and supports community giving. Their last achievements was cooperation with DKMS. This is the bone marrow donation NGO and foundation that we cooperate with. There is also a bunch of support that we have with Mam Marzenie Foundation. And lastly, we've been renovating garden and playground of Fundacja Preadopcyjna at Otwock. Last but not least is a fun factory. Funny name and funny stuff. This is all about well-being, and the network here supports very much all kind of well-being related actions for our employees. To give you some examples, we've been recently weekly promoting the well-being agenda and all associated activities, including well-being hour, best practice guide, promoting our well-being hub, which is large, and Go Challenge. We are moving a lot recently at NatWest. They were also promoting our employee assistance program, which helps us, especially during this pandemic time, from any angle that we can imagine. But proactively, they've also challenged our business and challenged our benefit set. And thanks to them, we've implemented Let Gimme. This is an ebook, a subscription platform from our employees that helps us to manage our well-being as well from the educational and rest angle. I was very quick, but I think I overrun. Hopefully, we will still have some time for questions. Thank you, Ivona.
Yes, that was quite impressive list of initiatives, Ella. I hope we'll have a chance in a minute to discuss all of this. Before we will start the Q&A session, I would like just to remind you to join us and our experts from GSK, NatWest, CBRE, and Fujitsu tomorrow for Talent and Ambassador session to learn how to drive cultural change by supporting development, recognizing and promoting female talent. So you received the same link as for today, so please join us tomorrow. So now it's a Q&A session. I strongly encourage all of you to switch on your cameras now and take active part in the discussion. Maybe Maria, Katie, Lara, Ella, to warm up a little bit our audience, you could start asking questions to yourself, and then we will see how the audience will react. Maybe comments to your presentations and to your experiences you just shared with us.
If I may, I have a question for Katie.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
I'm really curious about the tone from the top topic. How do you manage to make this a very rigid, stiff managers, the know-it-all type, to really actively participate into that?
It's a very good question, and I think our structure helps us here. As a law firm, what we have in place is we have a partnership board, we have an executive committee, and we have a global people committee. We also have diversity and inclusion partners. And so with the executive committee, what we have done is ask each of the partners that sits on that executive committee to be champions for each of our strands of diversity and inclusion. And so what they do is then we help them to expertise themselves on the different strands of diversity so that they can speak about it both with the juniors and with their peers, with their fellow partners as well. So we use those senior people to then influence the kind of managers and leaders that may sit underneath them. And we have found that that can be quite successful. The other thing that I think works in our favour as a law firm in particular is that this is a topic that is very much also being led by our clients. And clients are asking a lot of questions about diversity and inclusion and expecting some very good answers from partners and from lawyers, not from a D&I team. So that is a very great incentive for our people to kind of learn what's going on and be able to speak about it. Hopefully that answers your question.
Can I just add to that? Because when I joined Standard Chartered, we didn't have the structure in place. And it was one of the first things as part of helping to define the strategy of the organization that I look to help the organization set. So we started with working on what is the governance for around diversity and inclusion, how we're going to set accountability across our organization. And then kind of parallel to that was what's important to us, what do we think needs to be in our strategy? And I think not all organizations think that through when they're starting in this journey, or even in kind of in the middle. A lot of companies tend to have employee resource groups, which they're great and they really help drive this agenda, but the accountability for D&I cannot be placed on the employee resource groups. So it's really important to change that dynamic. When I joined the company, we had over 50 employee resource groups. And when I asked for diversity plans, people were like, speak to the Women's Network, whatever they're doing, that's our plan. That's not what you want to hear in our organization, right? So for us, it was, I met with the board, we discussed what the board was looking for. We ensure we set up a process that says, okay, we're going to report to you twice a year. How is the management team going to be involved? I meet with the CEO constantly. We then set up a global diversity council, and many companies have diversity councils. What's different about this council is that we didn't select the people who are most passionate about it. We were very strategic around who's going to be successors for key roles across the organization in senior roles, who needs this as part of development, who's doing this well, who's not doing this so well. But really, we need to hear their voices as well. And as part of selecting the council members, the CEO businesses identify different nominations, but the CEO selects them. It's part of their performance management, so they have an objective on their performance management. We also have diversity and inclusion, gender targets and inclusion targets, and ethnicity targets on our scorecards. So again, this then creates kind of that accountability. Underneath that, we then created country diversity councils and business diversity councils, where the country CEO or the business CEO is responsible for that diversity plan. They have to submit that diversity plan to our diversity office, and we give them feedback every year so that they can improve year on year. So again, this is something that needs to be built in as part of your governance that will help deliver your strategy.
Thank you. We have 2 questions in the chat, I guess both to all of you girls. First one, what would you say has been the biggest positive step forwards in respect to D&I in the past 10 years, and what can we expect in the next 10 years? So maybe Ella, you first.
So I think from the Poland's perspective, I think this is very important to kind of refer to our local ground. The biggest in 10 years is that we started talking about diversity and inclusion. I think some of the companies, they are already on the way, and they have mature plans, structures, policies, scorecards, employee-led networks, resource group, whatsoever. So we are already there. Some of the companies are just starting, which is also great, that they are on a different path to achieve what they need in the diversity and inclusion terms. But I think it's very important that we started to talk about it, actually. And this is the topic that became very, very important, because after all, we are all human beings and we are very different from each other. We have different needs, we have different beliefs. But I think us as companies, as large companies or smaller companies, but the business which is in a kind of privileged position, is our responsibility to help world be sustainable. So that's probably something that I would reckon as the most important thing. For the next 10 years, I have a very tricky wish that my role in terms of diversity and inclusion, and actually all the diversity and inclusion roles, will become obsolete, because diversity and inclusion will be so obvious that we will not need to talk about it in a special dedicated way. It just will become, an obvious thing to do, to think of, and just to live by. That's my personal opinion.
Thank you. Well said. Katie?
Yeah, I would agree with what's just been said. I think one of the biggest changes that I have seen in the last 10 years, and the biggest positive kind of step forward, is really engagement from people on a grassroots level. I think it's become a conversation that is more and more being had, and I think that is incredibly positive to see. what I see in the next 10 years is probably an increasing pressure to engage and grapple with some of the issues. As we've all said, the kind of business case for diversity and inclusion has been made a lot, but I can see it becoming even more of a business imperative to get right and moving more into that kind of inclusion space rather than the pure numbers, if you like, of diversity. So not necessarily just counting your people and where they are, but thinking about what their day-to-day is like, and the kind of rise of employee kind of activism, if you like, and expectation around what that is and what that looks like for people. I can see that bringing an increasing pressure on businesses over the next 10 years in the D&I space.
Thank you. Laura?
Yes, so I'm speaking from a manager's perspective. As I stated before, I'm not a D&I specialist. I can tell you what I see in the day-to-day business. Actually, this was not my belief before. I was asked to participate in this women mentoring at Scheffler program. And first of all, I was I had to back up and say, what's that? Women mentoring? Are we special? Why do we need special mentoring programs? I understood afterwards that speaking up and making this custom-made programs for all groups, it's very important, and it's the first step to cover this change. Maybe I didn't need that because in my culture I was lucky to be promoted based on my performance and my results. This one example that this one story that I shared with you before, this was really unique. Otherwise, I was lucky to live in a culture that doesn't care about genders in promoting talents. So I would say the biggest step right now today is that companies develop this custom-made programs, and also subtly being able not to point out that these minorities, or don't point out that you are somehow bad special if you participate in these programs. And Scheffler managed to do that, at least for me. What we expect in the next 10 years, I couldn't say right now for sure. We will all here participating at this conference, so for sure it will be progress.
Thank you. So I've got a very interesting question. I saw there's a lot of activities supporting women in business. Are there also some activities for men? Why may not have some problems like women, but still there are quite a few, as can be seen by the much higher suicide rates of men in comparison to women. So who would like to take a question?
I'm happy to answer that question, and I'm also happy to just comment a little bit on the what are the positive steps and what we expect to see in the next 10 years. So I'll start first with what has been positive. I think investors being more engaged in the diversity space. We're seeing that diversity and inclusion is moving up in the ESG ratings, which means it puts more pressure on companies to focus on diversity and inclusion. I would say the regulatory environment has also increased in regards to this area. Many years ago, people didn't think health and safety was that important until regulation came into play. I think we're going to start to see more and more regulatory requirements around diversity and inclusion. And then something similar to what Katie said was the awareness. People across the world are very engaged in this topic, and they want companies to really be at the forefront of driving change, because we're seeing that some governments are just not taking that step. In regards to what we expect to see in the next 10 years, one, the role of diversity and inclusion practitioners is going to become more and more important in companies, and we're starting to see that now with many of them reporting into the CEO office. There's going to be more challenges with more companies moving to hybrid working, so inclusion and exclusion and how to people leaders manage individuals working from home and those in the office, and how do you continue to create that environment? AI and technology is going to play a big role in regards to upskilling and reskilling people, and potentially people being left behind. So those are just some of the challenges that we're going to start seeing in the future. And even with COVID, if we start thinking about those who are being vaccinated versus those who are not being vaccinated, and what do you do? The US is currently dealing with that challenge now in companies of, do you create special floors for people who have been vaccinated versus people who aren't vaccinated? Do you tell people they have to wear a mask? Do you not? So these are quite a lot of challenges that will be coming up over the next number of years. In regards to engaging men and programs for men, absolutely. Our organization have male ERGs, which I know most companies don't tend to have. We also celebrate and we recognize International Men's Day. And as part of that, we talk about mental health, suicide prevention for men. We also when it's quite interesting, because people think when you just focus on, when you look at women, you're not looking at men. Actually, when you're looking at gender diversity, what it's doing is ensuring that we're looking at the full talent pool in more detail. Not just the women, but we're also looking at the men. We're also trying to understand, are there any specific men that are being left out from a development perspective, learning perspective, promotion, retention, all of engagement, and so on. So it's actually quite positive for men to engage with gender diversity, because it isn't just about women, and that's very important for them to understand, but also for organizations to really engage with them, to understand what are the issues that they are also facing across an organization.
Thank you. Ella, Maria, Laura, would you like to add something to this question?
So I think it's, yeah, I would reckon what Maria was saying, and the gender lens is important from any gender, for that matter, not only women, and we do tackle it a lot, be this the mental health of men, which tends to show off, different needs to support in this respect. Obvious topic for us, as we are quite young population in general at NatWest Poland. The average of age is 31 at the moment, and more people, they are becoming parents, and obviously dads. So there is a dedicated dads network at NatWest Poland, and they work together how to find themselves out in the dad's role, from the very practical to the emotional element. We also dedicate November to Movember. So we are talking a lot about men's health. And we also look from the gender perspective through diversity lens on various parts of our businesses. Some of our business lines, they would tend to have more ladies than men. And this is also something that we need to tackle from the smart point of view, because we would love to balance that as well. So not only we are talking about ladies being in the managerial positions, and this is very necessary, but we need men in certain roles. So the list is endless, and I don't want to steal the thunder from others wanting to share their views.
Thank you, Ella. We are running out of time, and I'm afraid we won't be able to address all comments and questions, which I'm really, really sorry for. And I promise from my end that I will personally make sure that those answers, those questions will be addressed and sent via email to all of you. So we will have just the last very short question to all of you. How to include without excluding? Let's start with Maria, just very shortly.
Engage all of your employees. It's that simple. Listen to your employees, have listening sessions. But also be honest in what you're looking for and what's the purpose of your organization. I think sometimes companies are not strong enough around that, and what are the values, and assessing individuals against those values, because sometimes the values don't align. And that's okay. And that's important to say that up front, because if the values of the individual don't align with the values of what the organization is trying to drive, then maybe that person is not the best person to be in your company. It's similar to other types of skills. And I think we need to focus on that area as well when we're assessing individuals.
Thank you. Katie?
I would endorse that, yes. Make sure you are speaking to and listening to all of your people and being honest in your explanations as to why certain actions are being taken. People aren't, children, they are adults, and they can understand and take on board the difficult business decisions that we're all grappling with. So I think that trust, communication and honesty helps people to understand what's going on and why, and that in itself is inclusionary.
Ella, you are nodding, so I guess you agree with what Katie and Maria said.
Yeah, I would second what the ladies were saying, and especially the trust and honesty element. I think you cannot think and dream of inclusive and diverse place, be this workplace or community, if you are not honest and you don't build the trust. So these are the keys, and there's no other way.
Lara, last word from you.
I have a short answer and a shorter answer. I will begin with the short answer. So what I would recommend also from my experience is that you should not be afraid to be able to handle situations, to be afraid to exclude. Don't act in fear, but trust in what you're doing for everybody. Let your diverse team come together and hear the different sides of the same truth. So really act. And the shorter answer would be that for an organization, you can try to go in two parallel directions. The first one is individual actions to promote individually. So for example, like the mentoring program, but also organize group actions to promote belonging.
Thank you. And thank you to all of you. Absolutely amazing session. There are still a lot of questions to address, but unfortunately we don't have time. As I promised, we will address all those questions and we'll send you the answers by emails. Thank you very much. Please join us tomorrow for Talent Ambassador sessions and follow us on social media for further initiatives under Working Together program. Thank you and have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Stay safe.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Have a great day. Thanks.
Bye.